It's preparing to go live. Hold on, that's what I'm talking about. All right, we are live.
Well, good evening, Royal Laners. We are coming to you from 4 different locations to bring you the In Focus. The Education Committee is so glad that you all could be here this Wednesday evening to hear from our guest panelists. We are talking tonight about self-care in the middle of COVID. We had a conversation back in May about some things we do to care for self, and we realize now that was just the very beginning of the conversation. So much has happened since then. And this past Sunday was the World Mental Health Awareness Day. And so the Education Committee wanted to do something in response to that. We are very excited to introduce Jana Deerdorf. She's been invited by Sarah Fuller, and she'll introduce herself in just a minute. We also have Tracy Newton, who was invited by Charlotte Sewell. Both of them work in the field of therapy and counseling. Like I said, I'll let them introduce themselves so they get their title and their expertise correct. But thank you, both of you, for coming. We are so glad to have you here this evening and really excited to hear what you have to say. So welcome to Royal Lane Wednesday night. There are people out there listening, so you'll just have to imagine some of our charming church folks.
And Sarah Fuller Phillips already commented, so we know that she's on.
She's there. Jana, would you just introduce yourself if you would let us know about your work, and also if you would like just about yourself or possibly your connection to Sarah and therefore us, we would love to hear more about you to start our evening off.
Okay, well, as you mentioned, my name is Jana Deerdorf. I am a marriage and family therapist here in the state of Washington. And I have a private practice in Paulsbo, Washington, Evergreen Counseling, where I work with couples, families, and adult individuals, the occasional adolescent. And I've done some work in community health, but where I met Sarah was we worked together. I was an intern at Seattle Pacific University, and she was a clinician there. And so we got to work pretty closely together for a couple of years. So so that's a little bit about what I do professionally. Personally, I'm a mom. I have 4 kids. Ages 22 is my oldest and 14 is my youngest, and 2 of them are in college. I've been married for, it'll be 24 years this year. So that's, I would say, my my biggest thing that I've done during this pandemic to just sort of help myself has been in the kitchen, like I'm sure many other people, but there's just something about baking and cooking that has helped to keep me feeling okay. So
wonderful. Well, thank you for the introduction. Sarah is actually a famous cookie maker in our congregation, so that's another thing you all have in common. Tracy, would you also please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work and also who you are?
Sure. Hi, I'm Tracy Newton, and I have been in practice for about 25 years. I figured out before this presentation. And I started in a community agency, and that's where I met Charlotte Sewell. She worked with me in a domestic violence agency about, I think it was 22 years ago I met her. And since then, we've had kids and kind of stayed in touch. And I've worked private practice in McKinney for about 18 years, and then I've moved to Dallas, and now I'm doing telehealth only, but I hopefully someday will do face-to-face and have an office in Dallas someday soon when this COVID stuff hopefully becomes a little bit more manageable. And I do trauma-informed therapy, work with anxiety, work with adults, adolescents. I love working with adolescents, work with couples, women's issues, and that sort of thing. So yes, and I've been married to my husband for 28 years. We've been together 32 years and have an almost 18-year-old daughter.
Well, we will hear from you, I think, from your field of expertise, and also both, it sounds like, as mothers. I think family has become such an interesting part of COVID because we've been closer together than we often are. As an introduction, we got together in May and began talking just about some of our missing connection to one another. And we as a church like to gather on Sundays and Wednesdays, and folks were missing that. Since that time, we have also faced crisis in America around the death of George Floyd. And I know Jana probably was experiencing fire and smoke herself personally. We have had here in Texas and our neighbor Louisiana, hurricane after hurricane, kind of riding right on the edge of the coast. So I was hoping you would just give us some ideas about that sense of being overwhelmed. Some of our parishioners say, I don't even know where to begin with how I am, because I almost feel paralyzed in just facing my own experiences of COVID. So when you think about self-care and kind of mental health, how do you help people in these moments of pandemic deal with that feeling of being overwhelmed or almost paralyzed in this moment because so much is happening?
Tracy,
Jan, are you first? Well, I think for us, I think that it's important to know and normalize for the person that we are not supposed to have stress for this prolonged period of time. I think when COVID first happened, we all had fear and we all had worry and we all did feel overwhelmed. And then we go in this fight or flight response and our adrenaline, our cortisol goes up and we think, okay, this is going to happen and we're going to figure it out. And we're going to manage it, but it keeps going on and on and on. And then we have the hurricanes and then we have the George Floyd and we have all the stuff in the news and it feels like there's no end. And that's why the overwhelm continues. And our body is just not made for this. Our body's made to run when we're in stress or to fight when we're in stress, not to just maintain this for such a long period. So first of all, we have to just tell ourselves that this is okay, that we feel this way. Right. And then we have to focus on how do we take care of ourselves and how do we maintain some sort of routine in all of this and how do we help each other in this. And there's a long list of things that we can do, but the first step is to say this is hard and this is horrible and give each other some grace in this, that this is not something that's going to be perfect and easy. I think we put the pressure on each other with these the perfect Pinterest projects and this person's over here organizing, this person's over here doing all this stuff really well, but a lot of us, the best we can do is get out of bed, and that is okay if that's all we can do that day. But the main thing is just to really take care by having that routine, getting out of bed, trying to get some good sleep, trying to follow a schedule, trying to exercise, even if it's the last thing we want to do, because that helps with that long-term stress. We have to take care of our body and our brain. And then also, do some mindfulness techniques, like relaxation exercises, like breathing techniques, and there's some apps that you can do to help with that. And, also trying to find a hobby, but not, again, giving yourself some grace with that. So there's a lot of different things. I'm sure Jana also has some other suggestions with that. But I think that, maintaining that schedule, not staying up too late. With me, I tend to want to, binge Netflix and, just watch one more show. But with that, I'm not taking care of myself. And so I do better when I do make sure I get that sleep. And I think that's the biggest thing, to tell yourself it's okay to be overwhelmed, because once we acknowledge it and validate it, it kind of takes the power away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with everything that you said. It's like I kind of go, there isn't really anything that tells us like this is how we should feel about this. I think something that you mentioned about it being a long-term thing, I think that's what really feels different. I've seen some graphs that have talked about kind of the whole process that we're going through. At first it's, a little bit like, oh, okay, here we are, we're shut down. This is kind of exciting. And then now here we are 6 months later and still experiencing, it's not just, the pandemic and shutdown, it's all these other things that have happened that have made it really difficult for people. So one of the thoughts that I have and questions, if for people that are listening, is I feel curious about one, what people are doing that they feel like is taking care of themselves, and how do people understand what self-care is? When we think about that idea of self-care, I feel like it probably looks very different for every person. And so, I would love to hear if there's people watching right now, what that looks like for people, and also, so I have that question, and also I want to speak to, um, what your question was, Laura, about like there's many people that are just feeling overwhelmed, and Tracy, I think you were spot on about just going, yeah. Yep. Absolutely you are, because this is such an overwhelming time, and there isn't a roadmap for how it is that we're supposed to deal with this. And so I think normalizing um, all the different feelings that we're feeling about it, and I think for every person it's probably very different. And so I think just one of the words that you use that has been resonating in my mind lately is just grace. Giving ourselves, learning how to truly give ourselves grace, and certainly giving it to other people, which I think both of those can be really challenging at times when things feel so stressful and difficult.
Well, and I mean, we're in a great environment to talk about grace. I mean, I think that is such a concept we share as church community. I also hear what you're saying, and I think it's hard for us all to remember how tightly connected the mind and the body are. I think when we are in the middle of crisis, it's so easy to either go into the mind and just cycle through the same feelings and thoughts and forget about the body, or vice versa. I know some people are intensely exercising as a way, in some ways, to remove themselves. So I love the idea of bits and pieces of both. Do some exercise, but do some mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we've faced as a congregation, I think, that has been very hard for us is every day grief continues to happen. We've had folks who were members for decades die of cancer. In May, we had a beloved member who was dying of a neurological disease die this summer. A beloved pastor died of Alzheimer's just in the past several weeks. So some of what I hear our parishioners, congregants talk about is it doesn't feel like there's room to do our normal grieving because so much is happening. And so I wondered if you could help us work through, do we try to address that in the moment? Is it okay to delay that grief? When you are working with people kind of in a big spectrum picture, how do you help them deal with what happens along the way in the middle of this crisis?
Well, I think it's all okay. I think that, it's important to do it in the moment to some degree. Some people, what they're doing is they're doing, Zoom memorials. And, when thinking about what y'all have gone through with the church, I was trying to envision something where maybe y'all do some sort of memorial, and maybe there's some sort of breakout groups where, people who feel comfortable, write down memories and share them, of the person who has passed, or they write a letter to that person and, they share those, or they just, put them somewhere, where it can go in some special place in the church, something like that. So that way they are getting something, out in the present, so they don't feel like they're being cheated of that ritual that's so important, but also they have a chance later on to go through that traditional ritual as well. And, it really is all about the ritual. That's what people are missing, but you can change it around a little bit and they can still get some degree of healing.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Finding ways, although it's not how we normally do it, it's not what we're used to doing, and so that can just feel frustrating and perpetuate the emptiness we might be feeling. But even just little things that you're able to do that are meaningful for you, to be, I love the idea of being in groups and being able to have things that you do in groups, like whether it's a virtual thing, but the idea is to not be grieving alone, and there's something that can be very comforting about that. Just to know that you're not alone in that grief and that loss. And I think acknowledging the grief and loss, I think is very important, especially when we're talking about a larger group. I think being just acknowledging it sometimes can be have some healing effect to it also. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You're right. Just stating I'm in pain, I miss this person. And I also miss that I've been cheated of my usual tradition. People can't come in town. They can't talk about this person in the old way that they used to do it. And being okay with saying I'm mad about this.
And I think I would also add, for people that might be listening to this that are really feeling alone in the grief and loss, and you know, at what point is it important to reach out for some help, to be able to talk to somebody about that? Because I think that especially right now, because we're not able to do things how we normally do them, the need to work through that and process through the grief and loss, and to just have a space where you can feel it and feel okay and feel supported and feel not alone, I think is important. And I think for people to feel okay, like it's okay if you need to reach out to somebody, if you need to talk to a counselor about it, if you need to talk to the pastor about it, and just to be able to share in the grief, to have someone sharing that grief with you, can be a powerful thing. And so I would definitely encourage people that might be really feeling that on a very deep level, not be afraid to reach out for some extra help. It's an important part of who we are as human beings. And so to just kind of push aside, well, I guess we'll deal with that later, like usually doesn't work, and can wreak some havoc on our lives sometimes. And so, finding those ways, things that we can do now to get through the grief and the loss.
Mhm. Well, and that loneliness that we have and that lack of connectedness that we have with the COVID, and that helps with that and helps us do that self-care we were talking about, helping us connect, connecting us with friends, but also connecting with a professional if we feel that helplessness and that hopelessness.
Mhm.
And if you don't feel like you know where to reach out, talking to your pastor or talking to your doctor, if you don't know what direction you can go into in finding a therapist.
So
Oh, go
a
ahead.
couple people answered your question, Jana, of what are you kind of doing to take care of yourself. Charlotte posted deep breathing really helps. And I think there's a strong connection between our physiology and stress, and how that stress keeps manifesting itself and how we feel horrible, and how do we bring our physiology back into balance. So deep breathing is one. And then Jennifer Maddox posted finding small ways to help make positive changes in our community. This helps me to stay connected with others. So it sounds like when y'all talked about community, she was saying that helping others gives us a mode to take care of ourselves as well.
Absolutely. There's something, oh man, I was just thinking about this the other day. It's like I have felt like when I get an opportunity to help someone, especially because we've been so isolated, like it feels so exciting. And I've noticed this about myself here recently, that when I get to help, I get to do something to help someone, that it certainly is good for my mental and emotional and spiritual well-being as well. But it's interesting that I've noticed how because there hasn't been as much opportunity, or it's just been different, and it's kind of been hard to find and awkward, and you just don't know how to help sometimes. But I love that. I think I know for me that is definitely helps me to get out of myself when I need
Well,
to.
and I think one of the powers of our church community when it's not COVID is there are some of our persons, myself probably would be included, part of our grieving is doing for others. When someone's family, you know, a loved one is lost, you bring food, you bring gift certificates, you buy groceries. And I think some of what is hard about COVID is that sense of identity that you share with others, we haven't been able to express. So it really has been hard. Or Pastor Mike, I'm not speaking out of turn. They had a high risk pregnancy, child born very early, baby Ford is finally home. But I know many of us, the impulse was to do for the family, and you just were left with this feeling, well, what do I do? You know, and that's been hard. We have a group of women who are on the missions committee sitting in the parking lot right now collecting things as they're listening, and it's Wednesday night and they're sitting in the parking lot, but they're so happy just to be doing something that they said, no, we'll come, we'll sit there for 2 hours. So I appreciate that sense of needing a place to put the energy, and you all helping us think of creative ways to use that energy. Because when you have that sense of identity and you don't know how to express it, I think that leads to that sense of meaningless, or like our purpose during COVID isn't what it was. I love the idea, thank you, about writing letters, even to those who we've lost. I just really was captured by that, because some of these people were part of our church family for 40 years. I mean, they raised their children here, they've raised other people's children here. And so not being able to communicate in their last weeks, and you know, our beloved pastor who died of Alzheimer's, that meant the communication was limited even before that. So the idea of a letter is just a beautiful. So thank you for that.
So since we have some good, we're having some good interaction on YouTube.
Great.
So I want to let everybody know on YouTube that we do have about a minute delay. So if we don't get to your comments or questions in a timely manner, that's why. But Stephen Rhodes put, I retired in January, then the world blew up, and I then turned a hobby into a small business, and it's kept him busy and sane. So some people have picked up new ventures in the time of COVID. And then Gary Wisdom said, I have regularly scheduled Zoom meeting each Friday evening with friends, and that helps to stay connected every week with people. So there are folks trying to find goodness and work and play all in the midst of this.
Yes, great ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and let people know if you have questions for Tracy and Jana, please feel free to put them in the live stream chat, because we can send those questions straight here. I thought we would move in another direction. I know you both introduced yourself as mothers. I know I'm a mother and Mike is a father, and really in our congregation, almost everybody feels responsible for somebody else. And one thing that's been hard, I think, during COVID is you worry, how do I care for the people I feel responsible for? You know, it sounds like you both have adolescents. I have younger children, but we have mothers who have full grown children and grandchildren that now they worry about, and grandfathers and aunts and uncles. So can you help us just process or think of ways that we do self-care in that sense of responsibility that we feel, or that sense of it being beyond our control or out of our control, things that we normally would do or help or want to do for others?
Well, it's certainly a valid feeling to, you know, when you're used to, as you said, you know, your role is being, you know, you're caring for these people, and now everything has changed, and I feel a sense of responsibility, and that can really become a heavy burden to carry in the climate that we're in right now. I think that's, you know, you hear of people, you know, they're trying to do school, and they're trying to, you know, we were talking before we started about, you know, one mom that is home and has to stay isolated and is doing school, and is also the fun mom, and also, you know, having to be everything to the people that they're caring for. And so I think that it's, you know, it really is a unique time where we're feeling the heaviness. I think many people that I'm seeing are feeling the heaviness of that in a very different way. And even for families that are trying to figure out, you know, who's going to work, who's staying home, how do we juggle all of this? And so I think I just want to acknowledge that can really be, it really is a challenge for many, many people and many families. And so how do we, in the midst of that, as parents, grandparents, people responsible for other people, take care of ourselves. And I think it's when your role is kind of to take care of other people, it's sort of hard to think about like, oh, taking care of myself. Some people might,
Mhm.
it's like, oh geez. And I always use the analogy of the oxygen mask, right? They tell us when we're on the airplane, okay, put your oxygen mask on first before you give it to someone else, but before you can help someone else. And it really is that, but that I feel like it's easier said than done right now. And so I think it's very important to take time to, I hate to say, it sounds so cliche, but to check in with yourself, to really, we don't think about that sometimes, but to really stop and just say, how am I doing? How am I doing here? Because we kind of talked a little bit about, what are some indicators for, oh, actually, I'm not doing really good, because sometimes we won't really know we're there until we're there and we're going, whoa, I am not doing very good. Help, I need some help, and I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And so I think learning the art of pausing and really slowing down and going, okay, I need to check in and see how am I doing? How am I doing? Are there things? Am I having feelings that are come up that I don't understand, that feel overwhelming? Are there things that I'm really needing? And it's almost like having you're having a conversation with yourself, just like you would with a friend, I think, and go, okay, what is it that I'm really needing, and where am I at right now? And then, from there, be able to find ways, it helps you. Like, I feel like that alone, taking the time to do that, helps you to be able to make sure that you're getting what it is that you really do need. Go ahead.
Well, and I think also it's also, again, giving yourself that grace and your family that grace. What I've seen is that many of my clients are, dealing with the, should I let my child go to school? Should I not let my child go to school? What will other people think? And I think in that there is, in some ways, there's not a right or wrong answer, because it's always a toss up. Some kid may only learn in person. Some kid may learn better at home. One child may have health issues. One child, may really just need to stay home because of all the things going on in the family. Everything is very, very personal, and the fear of judgment is really affecting people's decisions, and it's creating a lot of shame, a lot of questioning of decisions. And I think that is harming more people and causing more conflict with friends, with neighbors, with family. And I think in that we've got to just be okay with other people's decisions, and be okay what they decide to do, and know it's always a personal decision, as long as they take precautions, of course, safety precautions with wearing a mask and all that, and doing all those things. And it's really tough. It's very tough, but people are still going to do what they need to do for themselves and their family. And it's that grace for ourselves and for others, because I think most people are trying to do the best thing that they can. And it's a difficult issue.
Yeah, it is. It reminds me of, I think it was a Brené Brown quote, but a story that she told about her husband, about, do you believe that people are doing the best that they can? And he said, well, I don't know, but I know that for me to believe that people are helps me.
Yes.
And I've thought about that, within, I'm like, how would I say that in my own words? What does that mean for me? And I think it's that idea of grace, and just going, I have to be able to give other people grace. Like, is there a part of me that wants to be super judgmental and tell people how they should be doing things? Like, probably, if we're honest, like, there might be a part of us that does that, but we certainly have the choice in how we're going to respond to that voice at the table, and I think now more than ever, I think responding with grace not just helps other people, but it helps us also. And
Yes.
and being able to go, you know what, actually, yes, I know there's that part of me, but there, I also, it helps. It's so much more helpful to believe that people are doing the best that they can.
Yes. It's part of our self-care.
Yes, yeah. And I, it's like I wonder. I'm like, oh, are there people that are like, oh man, that's really just kind of a, yeah, right. Certainly that's, sure, that's nice in theory, but it's,
Yeah.
I think part of that is practice, right? I mean, I think one of the hardest things to do is have self-compassion, and there's a lot of research out there about having self-compassion and
Yes.
having compassion for ourselves, and how that does affect mind, body, spiritually. It's a hard thing to do when you're not used to doing that, because being hard on ourselves is kind of what helps keeps us in line, and helps us to be good citizens and all of that. And so we have that critical voice inside of us. But I think especially right now, being able to know that that's there, and speak to that part of us that might be critical of ourselves or other people, and just kind of go, okay, we got to reassign your job for a little while.
Yeah.
We need you you're right, but to a degree, but what's more important right now is that we're having grace and understanding, compassion for ourselves and others.
Mhm.
Well, and I hear you speaking of that sense of vulnerability. I think when we think of mental health and mental illness, it's so hard for us to be vulnerable to others. And when you add that layer of responsibility, if I'm talking to someone on the phone who's having a hard time, then I think, well, do I tell them I'm really struggling too? Or will that bring them even more down? I
Yeah.
think in church congregations, you kind of want to be the folks who are building each other up. And I think sometimes vulnerability ends up feeling like weakness. And what you're
Yeah.
saying is grace and compassion, but it's hard to do that. So I love just your permission for us to be vulnerable. And it is hard during COVID when everyone is in their own homes facing their own struggles. When you just read Facebook pages, it can seem like everybody is happy making their homemade bread and eating their pancakes for free, And so I'm so appreciative you brought up that sense of how it cannot be helpful to compare ourselves or to question our decisions based in the context of others. Mike, do we have any questions coming in? I have a few more, but
Yeah,
I don't want to step on.
yeah. I think initiating the Saint Brene Brown. She's a lot of our saints, and so we Sarah said, I think she was saying this as, and there's a time delay as y'all are saying it live. I think it's the hardest to believe this about ourselves and have compassion for ourselves, for me at least, like the vulnerability, and to believe that we're okay, and that things are we're going to get through this, and that we're the only ones struggling and everybody else is not. And then she said that's important to her. So it seems like, I think a lot of people that are in YouTube right now are struggling with the vulnerability of I don't know if I'm doing this right. I can't get this right. But there is no I mean, what is right in this time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there is no normal. Like, I mean, we had a pandemic, and I had a child born at 29 weeks, and with medical conditions, stuff like that, and there's almost not a day goes by that I think, man, I need to be a better pastor right now for people in this time. And so I have to do the same thing. I have to have grace with myself to say, this is a season, and we're going to get through this together. And maybe they have more grace for me than I do for myself.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's sort of the internal struggle, right? It's that part of us that can be very critical of ourselves, and being able to, I think, to dismiss that part of us, a lot of times isn't it doesn't make it any better, because it's still there. And so it's like, you're kind of, we call it in a certain modality an exile. We're exiling those parts of ourselves,
Mhm.
and so it's more about, I think, learning how to lead those parts of you. We call it internal family systems. It's like a big
Yeah.
family inside, everybody at the table crazy family dinner, but we have all of these different voices and different, we think of, oh, part of me feels this way and part of me feels that way. It's like, I think what is important during this time is learning how to, and believe me, I'm preaching to the choir here because I'm doing this, I'm doing this work myself, but learning how to hold those different things that I'm feeling, learning how to hold, oh man, I should be doing this and I should be doing this better. And also like, man, I really do need to have grace for myself, and not letting either one of those things get into the driver's seat, because then what happens when I do that? Well, then I start being, critical of other people. And then I'm, really operating from a place of fear and judgment. And, I think learning how to hold both of those things and be gracious to even those voices that maybe we don't like to hear. But being able to go, okay, I see you, you're there, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to be gracious to ourselves. We're going to be understanding, and I'm doing the best that I can. I'm going to sit here, and I should be maybe reading a book to my kid right now, but I'm not, and and I'm going to be okay with that. Like it's okay. It's I think learning how to lead yourself when you have those multiple things that you're feeling.
Yes, because we're all doing the best we can.
That's right. Yeah. Something, Laura, that you said that, and I say this a lot, but it's this idea of space for grace. I was like, I think we got to have space for grace. And, kind of what you're saying, it's hard when we're talking about vulnerability and community, how to have that vulnerability with each other. And I think something that I am learning, and especially now, like within my own family, like we're all a lot closer and spending way more time together. And, when you have people going through a hard time, we have that tendency, especially if, we're empathic people, we're gonna really care and be concerned. And so where's that line where you can hold that space for somebody and make it safe for them to feel the hard things that they're feeling without taking it on yourself, because it's hard. And I think that this is a lot of the mixed emotion I think that people feel with what's going on in our world, where it comes to race, where it comes to politics and all of these things that are so big and heavy, and you feel so much compassion. It's like, and how much, you hold space for that, and how do you do that without taking it all on? Because we can really, there's a thing called compassion fatigue, and we can definitely we can experience that. And so I think part of it is learning how to hold that space for other people, to allow people to feel and go through hard things, and be a safe place for people to be able to do that without worried about how you're going to respond to it. I got to do something. I got to make it right. I got to help them to feel better, because what does that say when somebody's trying, when you're feeling bad, somebody's doing everything they can to help you feel better, which you understand their intentions are good, but what you're really needing is just for them to be with you, and for you to be okay with them not being okay. And to me, that's that's community, that's vulnerability, that's being an emotionally safe community. And I think that's important too. And even in our families, I would add that too.
Yes.
The way we be with our families.
So the ability to sit with someone and be there with them and be okay with that, with their pain, is a good way to be helpful to someone, when they're having that hard time. And that's what we go to school for.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And on this topic, one of the questions is, what are some tangible actions or ways we can invite more grace into our relationships with others and ourselves? So we're talking about it, but what are your opinions on what can we actually do to initiate this?
Well, it would be to be okay sitting with someone and just listening, being there, not trying to, put our opinions in there, or put our point of view in there, but just sitting with them, just, as we were just talking about, and, part of a counselor's job is to bear witness to someone's pain, to what they're going through. And so it's kind of a degree of that, just being there and being okay with it. Just, if you're within the same household, holding someone, listening to someone. Sometimes I think that, emotions are uncomfortable. So people just kind of detach emotionally, but try not to do that. Just being there, being present. But also you can tell someone's isolating, reaching out to them, doing a Zoom call, FaceTime, or calling them on the phone, just saying, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. How are you doing? How is this going for you? Has it been hard for you going through COVID? Asking the tough questions and being okay with the tough answer. I think some people are like, what do you think of the weather today? When they're really wondering, is this person doing okay? So asking the real questions. Today we're talking about, if someone's having a hard time, talk to them about going to a mental health counselor, talk to them about, talking to a spiritual leader, talking to them about, reaching out to their doctor, or a friend. Well, these are ways to do it. Ask them directly, do you think you need to talk to someone? Be okay with asking those tough questions. I think is, some of those big steps that you can take to really connect with someone on those levels.
Yeah. I think what came to my mind when you brought up that question, the tangible actions to grace. I was thinking like, okay, for me personally, like, what is that? Because it's a great question. I think, Tracy, the things that you said are right on. I think what I wrote down was noticing how I'm reacting. And to me, I feel like that's sort of almost like the first step in that, because you can't just like automatically, oh man, okay, guess what? I'm going to be gracious to myself today and gracious to everyone else, because, we can know that in our minds, but what's happening inside of us might be something completely different. And then we beat ourselves up because, man, I'm supposed to be gracious and I'm not being gracious. And, so the cycle continues. And so, I think that the first part to that, I think, is noticing. Tracy, you said listen to other people, and I would say also listen to yourself. Notice what your reactions are. And I think that's sort of a first step. Like, notice, like, okay, actually I'm really uncomfortable with my kids melting down right now, and I'm not having a lot of grace for them right now. What does that look like? How do I manage what that brings up for me in those moments where I'm just trying to get my kid to do this homework assignment, and they're melting down. And so I think learning, taking that first step and listening and becoming aware of what's happening inside of you. I would say, like, name it to tame it. It's like when you can identify and give something a name, it takes something, it lessens the power that it might have. I think it helps to sort of, helps us to be able to observe what it is that we're experiencing, if that makes sense. When you can, that's part of what listening is. It's like you're pausing for a moment and you're observing what you're experiencing. Because when you're in it, you're experiencing it. Like, you're feeling all the feels and all of that. But when you can stop and go, okay, what's going on inside of me right now? And notice those reactions, then you can sort of begin to work through, okay, how is this informing the thoughts that I'm having about this? And begin to sort of make those changes to be able to look through a lens of grace. Because I think a lot of times that's not our initial go-to, and so I think it takes practice, and I think it takes a little work and looking inward to understand how to look through that lens.
I agree. I've never heard name it to tame it. I've never heard it said that way. I like that.
It's my community mental health days. That was one of my favorite takeaways from that one. It's always those things that like you apply on a daily basis for yourself. You're like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Okay. Yeah.
I wrote that one down too. Mike, are there any more questions? And then I'm going to move us in just a little bit of a new direction. Okay.
No, I mean, just basically everybody is agreeing and saying this is really good content, and I do have somebody that posted, sometimes I don't start with grace, but I find it if I persevere, I can move to graciousness. So sometimes it takes a while to get there.
That's good. Can I make a quick comment on that? Because I was just listening to something today that talked about allowing ourselves to go through experiences because it will change. You know, it is going to change. The experience is going to change. And sometimes we're just afraid to experience it. And so it's that whole idea, it's like, okay, if I could just sort of persevere, it's going, you know, we're going to get past it. And it's hard because it feels like this is, you know, like when I apply it to here we are 6 months later, I think, really, is it really going to change?
I know.
Yes, it will.
It will. Darn it.
I don't know. I'm holding on to hope.
Well, one of our, it's not a hidden agenda at all, but I think one of what we hope to do as the Education Committee and inviting both of you is just to give folks the face of two people who do counseling and therapy. I think it can be an intimidating world to folks. I think partly generational, but for other reasons, we can think of going to talk to someone seeking grace, seeking mental health as something we don't do, other people do. And one of the goals, I think, of the World Mental Health Day is just to lose some of that stigma. So first, let me say, you both have been so full of grace and so charming. I would love to spend an hour with each of you. It's been delightful. But also, for our folks who maybe haven't thought about talking to someone who works in a professional capacity, now that we have COVID, now that we've had serious grief in our congregation, now that we've had serious crisis as a nation, now that we have an environment that is, we feel like sometimes melting down around us, are there cues that people might be paying attention to for themselves or for the people they love that say, maybe it is time to seek someone who has been trained and educated to be a presence and to be a listener? Are there kind of guides or cues you could give for us to be hearing in ourselves or others where we might think, this is time to call someone and just see if I can make an appointment? This is when I finally need just to take that step for my own self-care and mental health.
Definitely. I would say if you notice that, always watching the news, always paying attention to the negative stuff on social media, looking at, not only just looking at the news, but also reading what the trolls say at the bottom. I have a few clients who I keep saying, stop reading at the bottom what the people write, because they write it because it's anonymous. They can write whatever they want and not feel any consequences. And, when you find yourself just obsessing over that, it's time to start looking at, maybe I need some help, someone to talk to, figure out how to sort through this, because it becomes an obsession. It feeds into that anxiety when you can't sleep, when your appetite changes, when you're starting to feel really, really hopeless, and you feel, it's almost like, Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, you feel just this weight on you. Sometimes with my clients, we talk about feeling like you're just in, a fog. It's like, trying to swim through, pea soup, and you just, you can't focus. It just, everything is exhausting. It's hard to, do just everyday tasks. When you feel that stuff going on, when the overwhelm feels that you just cannot get through it. It's not typical overwhelm. It's not regular stress. It's just something you feel that you'll never, ever get through. When it feels unmanageable, that's when it's definitely time to start thinking of someone to talk to. And some therapists are seeing people face to face, where, they're taking several precautions. They're wearing masks. Their clients are wearing masks. They do the distance. Some have plexiglass. Many are doing telehealth like I am. I mean, there's lots of different options. And again, it's one of those things where there's no right or wrong. Everyone's doing the best they can and what they need to feel that connection. And so there are a lot of options out there. And so I think it's also important to know that. And also with therapists, you know, if you don't connect with one, there are others that you will. There's a lot of personalities. There's a lot out there. That's one thing I feel about therapists, doctors, everyone. It's a lot of competition, especially like in the Dallas area. You can always find a good one out there. There's many good ones out there.
Yeah. Like I always tell I tell new clients, it's like dating. Like you know, you don't want to get into like this committed relationship. Like it's okay when you want to find the right fit for
Yes.
sure. So that's important. And I would add to what you said, Tracy, you know, to not wait till you're in crisis.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times, you know, that will happen. It's like you'll wait until like, oh my goodness, you know, I'm past my capacity to deal and I need to talk to someone now, and you're in crisis. And I think, you know, paying attention to some of those cues, you know, where and I encourage people to it doesn't have to be some big, like, oh, you know, some big thing in order to come and talk to somebody. Like you just might need to talk to somebody. And I've certainly noticed over these last 6 months that our capacity has become limited because of all that's happened in our lives and in our world. And so, you know, our capacity is less than what it used to be, I think, for a lot of people. And so needing to just have a place where you can talk and feel supported and it feels safe, and where you can process through some things. Sometimes therapy is just great for even just that. You know, it could be the big things. It could be like, I've experienced this incredible grief and loss, and I'm having, you know, so much emotional distress, and that's good too. And on the flip side of that, it's like, even if it's just like, you know what, I really think I could benefit from just sitting down and being able to talk about things and learn how to grow and learn how to help lead myself better through this, you know. So
Good point.
Well, and I like just the image, that space for grace. It's almost a gift to self. I mean, I imagine folks who have a chance to talk to you as the world is spinning just have this gift of a place where it's safe to be true and vulnerable and sincere. And in this world, we don't always find those spaces. So I so appreciate there are people who are called to create that space for us. So thank you very much. Mike, do we have any final questions or comments? Okay. We just have, I would say, probably 4 or 5 minutes left. So I wanted to give you a chance, if there's something we didn't ask you about that you thought, oh, I wish I had said this, or if you want to just leave us with some words of wisdom, or if you want to come back another time and you want to leave us with a great to be continued thought, we would appreciate that too. When you said internal family systems, I thought, oh goodness, we could have you both back and you could teach us about internal family systems. I was fascinated by that.
In an hour.
In an hour, right. We're very smart at Royal Lane. We learn quickly. No, please, we are so glad that you have been with us, and thank you. I know you both are working and moms, so we've really valued your time, and just want to give you a few minutes to kind of bring closure to the meeting or what you're thinking.
Well, I would just like to say, thank you for inviting me to be here, Charlotte, and the church. And I think the big thing is just, I would like everyone just to be aware that it is okay to be stressed right now. It is normal to be stressed right now. And it's normal to be overwhelmed right now and frustrated. And, and to say this word again, give yourself that grace. It is okay. And it's okay to ask for help. And it's hard, it's uncomfortable, but therapists are typically very friendly, very nice. And if they're not, fire them. And the connection is important, and it gives you that space where you can feel comfortable. And telehealth actually has good research behind it that people feel that it's very effective, even though it does seem a little different. But many people are comfortable with that, and they do feel a little bit safer with it right now with COVID. But it is important to take care of yourself, and that is one way. I tell clients that, it's almost like getting a massage. You feel better typically when you leave the room, when you leave the computer that day. Typically people feel lighter, oftentimes it depends on what's discussed that day, but it is a way to take care of yourself, whether or not there's COVID or not.
Well, I so appreciate being invited. Thank you, Sarah, and Mike and Laura. It's just been, I felt very excited to I get to go do community tonight, and it speaks to my own desire for that and longing for that. And so thank you very much for letting me come and be a part of your community and to talk about mental health during this time, because there's a lot of statistics coming out and research coming out about how this is affecting people, and the fact is that it is. Everybody to different capacities, but it's important to go, okay, what can we do? What are some tools that we can have? I was thinking like the things, oh, there's a dog, but there's things, that are crisis things, that we do in the moment, but then, we're experiencing sort of this long-term stress and difficulty. And so, getting some tools to help yourself through those times, and really learning to take care of yourself. And for those of us who are parents and grandparents and caregivers and even neighbors, or, so that we can take care of others, to me is what brings meaning to my life. And so it's an important thing for sure. So
we have a lot of people online saying thank you. This was very helpful, a wonderful hour. Thank you for bringing your wisdom to help. So there's good comments on YouTube about that.
Good. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I will say to Royal Laners, if you heard something tonight that was interesting or we want to pursue more, let the Education Committee know, and we can talk more about. There was so much in this time. I feel like we could pull so many pieces out and give them a full 45 minutes or an hour. So thank you for coming, and thank you, Royal Laners, for watching on the live stream. This is being recorded and we will leave it online. I know I like to hear these twice at least so that I can pick up the pieces that I missed. So I will certainly be listening, watching again. And if you have people in your life who might enjoy watching this, Royal Laners, please invite them to. I think this is something important. And peace to everyone. Mike, I don't know, does it feel too awkward when you're doing Zoom and live stream to close us in prayer?
No, there's still people tuning in, so I will do so.
Please do.
God, we are grateful for this time together. I know that you're a God that wants to bring about health in the world, and however that happens, and that you bring people alongside us to help us get to places of health. So as we continue to live through this pandemic, through racial and social unrest, through all the things that weigh us down, personal and public, we pray your strength, your guidance, and those people to come around us and assist us along the way. Thank you again for this time together and for these wonderful presenters who have given us a piece of themselves and of their knowledge. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you, and peace to everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.